What's up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. First, I want to start by congratulating the Denver Nuggets on their first NBA title. And of course, I want to congratulate Nikola Jokic for winning his first Finals MVP to go along with all the other accolades that are accumulating on his Hall of Fame resume. Now, that's pretty good for a man who was taken in the second round of the draft because people said he was slow, unathletic, and I quote, has zero muscle definition and can't jump at all. I guess it all turned out okay for the Joker, though. And now that the season is over, all attention turns to this year's draft, where the San Antonio Spurs won the rights to the first selection, where they're going to take a kid who's supposed to be the best talent coming into the draft since LeBron James, or maybe Nikola Jokic. His name is Victor Wembanyama, and he's the ultimate unicorn. This 19-year-old monster, at 7 foot 2 inches tall, can protect the paint like a traditional big, can dribble like a point guard, and can pull up from deep like KD. If he puts everything together, and if he stays healthy, which is something people his size have trouble doing, especially with his thin frame, he could be the one rewriting the history books in a few decades. And since we're getting closer to this year's draft, one that could be one of the most important drafts of this generation, I wanted to take a look at some of the past drafts and discuss some of the best draft day steals in NBA history. And no, I'm not talking about the Spurs stealing the lottery from my Celtics and drafting Tim Duncan, forever changing the courses of both franchises. I'm still salty about that, but Duncan was the number one pick and everybody knew he'd be great, kind of like Victor this year. This is about players found later in the draft, who went on to become great players and even change the fortunes of the teams that drafted them. And just a disclaimer, we're only going to look at players drafted from the 1980s to the present. This is because prior to that point, the draft process was entirely different, and there were 10 rounds or more. In fact, the draft still had 7 rounds up until 1989. The draft lottery we all know today didn't even exist until 1985. That's why we won't be seeing names like Tiny Archibald or Alex English, or folks like Bill Laimbeer or the Iceman George Gervin, who were actually both third-round picks. And also, while Michael Jordan was pretty much a steal going at number 3, there was another legend that was drafted ahead of him in that draft, and he did still go number 3. At that spot, people still expect greatness, and MJ delivered, but he was drafted too high to make this list. But we are going to start the list off with a couple of legends he sparred with in the finals. My number 10 selection might actually make some of you mad because it's 2 people, and they were both picked in the middle of the first round, so not too late, but they were selected in back-to-back years and went on to become one of the greatest duos in NBA history, and their names will forever be tied together. For number 10, I'm going with John Stockton and Karl Malone of the Utah Jazz. Stockton was drafted number 16 in 1984 out of Gonzaga, and went on to become the NBA's all-time leader in steals and assists, 2 records nobody has even come close to matching at this point. Malone was drafted the next year in 1985 at number 15. By the time Malone retired, he had 2 MVPs and was number 2 on the all-time scoring list. He's currently number 3 all-time. These 2 legends played together in Utah for 18 years, making the playoffs every season. Together they won over 1,000 games if you include the playoffs. They even made the finals twice, losing to MJ's Bulls both times. And while these 2 Hall of Famers never won a ring together, they turned a lowly small market team into a perennial playoff powerhouse. So for that, they get my number 10 spot. For number 9 on my list, we have to go back to the second pick of the 1998 draft, when the then Seattle Supersonics selected Rashard Lewis. This McDonald's All-American was drafted right out of high school, and as you can tell by the fact that he was drafted so late, nobody expected much from Lewis. But as soon as he was given the chance to see some action, he proved he was able to produce at the NBA level. Over the course of his 16 NBA seasons, Lewis averaged just under 15 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal a game. He was also named to 2 All-Star teams and was a contributing factor in Miami's title run in 2013. And while Lewis may not be as great as some of the others on this list, it's very rare that somebody drafted in the last spot of the draft can have such a long, successful career in the league. So Rashard Lewis definitely deserves the number 9 spot. And while Lewis was picked with the 32nd pick in 1998, for number 8, we're going to go 1 pick earlier in the 2001 draft. With the first pick in the second round of the draft, the Golden State Warriors selected Gilbert Arenas, otherwise known as Agent Zero. In fact, he wore the number 0 because one scout was quoted as saying that's how many minutes Arenas would play at point guard in the NBA. But Arenas was able to prove the scouts wrong, as he was one of the best offensive point guards of his era. With career averages of 20 points, over 5 assists and 1.5 steals per game over the course of 12 seasons, Gilbert also added 29 40-point games and went for over 50 twice. Highly overlooked during the draft, Arenas started coming into his own around 2003, winning the Most Improved Player award. He made 3 All-Star appearances and 5 All-NBA selections, including 2 All-NBA Team second picks. And with a career like that, there was zero chance that Gilbert would be left off this list. Now for number 7, we have to go to Argentina to talk about the only non-American player to win an NBA title and an Olympic gold medal in a 12-month span. With the 27th pick in the second round of the 1999 draft, the San Antonio Spurs selected Manu Ginobili out of Bahia Blanca. He was so unknown that even the video games at the time didn't know how to pronounce his name. But Ginobili went on to be a cornerstone for the San Antonio Spurs dynasty, helping them rack up 4 championships in his 16 years with the team. In his time with the Spurs, Ginobili made 2 All-Star appearances and was voted 6th Man of the Year in 2008. Over his career, the player they call Argentina's Flying Man averaged over 13 points, 3.5 rebounds and assists, and 1.5 steals per game, though in his prime he was closer to a 25-5 guy. He's also top 30 all-time in playoff points scored. But the numbers don't tell the whole story for Manu, as he sacrificed minutes to come off the bench for San Antonio when he could have started and played a much bigger role for another team. But either way, it led to a Hall of Fame career from such a late pick in the draft, as Ginobili was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2022. And he also had a very famous run-in with the bat that put him in some hot water with animal activists, but even that wasn't enough to keep him off this list. And for number 6, we go from a player who was the cornerstone of one dynasty to a player who played a huge role in getting rings with 2 different teams. In 1986, with the 3rd pick in the second round, the Detroit Pistons grabbed the greatest rebounder and one of the best, most physical defenders to ever play the game, a man that we call the Worm. Dennis Rodman, a man known as much for his off-the-court antics as his intensity on the court, was one of only a few players in league history who could have such an impact on a game without ever scoring a point. Over the course of his 14-year career, Rodman won 5 rings, 2 with the Bad Boy Pistons and 3 with their arch-nemesis over in Chicago. Rodman only averaged 7 points and just under 1 steal and 1 block per game to go along with 13.1 rebounds, but those numbers don't begin to tell the whole story of the impact he could have on any game. The man could take over an entire game on the defensive end with his disruptive physical play. In fact, he was the reason the Bulls were able to neutralize Shaq when he was in Orlando to get past him for their first ring after MJ's comeback. You could argue that without Rodman, they never get past Shaq. He never runs out west, and the Bulls don't have a second three-peat. Even after Shaq went to LA, Rodman still shut him down and terrorized him whenever they faced off, even holding the most dominant player of his era to just 4 second-half points in the game they played in 1996 on the way to Chicago's second of 3 rings. The Worm's 13.1 rebounds per game puts him at number 10 all-time. But what he did was more impressive because everybody above him played in the 1960s and 70s, where there were over 140 missed shots per game and teams averaged 70 rebounds per game. Rodman had a higher rebounding percentage than anyone else on the list. He led the league in rebounds 7 times in an era dominated by elite big men. He was also selected as an All-Star twice, won 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, was selected to 8 all-defensive teams, including 7 first-team picks, and was All-NBA third team twice. He was also elected to the Hall of Fame in 2011, and while he may be one of the more polarizing players of his era, there's no debate about him taking my number 6 spot on this list. And now that we're halfway through the list, I want to talk about some of the players who didn't make the cut but do deserve honorable mention. I mentioned MJ and some of the OGs from the 70s and 80s, but 2 modern-day players that finished just outside the top 10 were Marc Gasol, drafted with the 18th pick in the second round in 2007, and Michael Redd, drafted with the 13th pick in the second round back in 2000. Let me know in the comments if you think there was anybody else who deserved to be on this list. And as we get into the top 5, you'll notice that we make a jump from some really good players to truly great, elite, game-changing athletes here at the top of the list. And remember, this is just about draft day steals, so that doesn't mean that the number 1 player here on the list is better than the number 5 player. It just means that their pick was a more valuable draft day steal. Which is why Giannis Antetokounmpo is only number 5 on the list. With the 15th pick in the first round of the 2013 draft, The Milwaukee Bucks selected a raw talent who at age 19 had only been playing ball for 5 years, and none of that was actually at a truly competitive level. Before the draft, one scout was quoted as saying, "With his tall, lanky frame and long, skinny arms, Giannis Antetokounmpo has a ways to go in order to look the part of an NBA player." His athleticism was also questioned, with reports stating, "The Greek Freak doesn't exactly have freakish athletic ability to go along with his nickname. Compared to some freaks in the NBA, Giannis Antetokounmpo might appear relatively normal. Giannis doesn't explode out of the gym with his leaps, and he won't blow past anyone with his speed either." But the Bucks saw something in the Greek Freak, and it certainly worked out well for both of them. Now, Giannis only averaged 7 points and 4 rebounds his rookie year, but he did show flashes of what was to come. Over the next few seasons, Giannis worked on his game and had a major growth spurt, going from 6'9" to 7 feet tall. He also put on some weight, and all of this was starting to pay off. By the 2017 season, he had finally broken out, winning Most Improved Player and being named to the All-NBA and All-Defensive Second teams. And this would only be the tip of the iceberg for this Nigerian-born superstar. Over his 10 seasons in the league, Giannis has averaged 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists to go along with a block and a steal per game. But given his slow start, it makes sense his numbers would pale in comparison to his prime years, where he averaged about 30 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists a game. In just the past 7 seasons, Giannis has amassed 7 All-NBA selections, with 5 being first team, and 5 All-Defensive teams, with 4 being first team picks. Giannis won Defensive Player of the Year in 2020, and back-to-back MVPs in 2019 and 2020. In 2021, Giannis won his first ring and Finals MVP. That postseason, Giannis averaged 30 points, 5 assists, and just under 13 rebounds per game. This is one of the most impressive 7-year stretches in NBA history, and the Freak still has plenty left in the tank as he's not even 30 yet. So he may have a chance to move up this list, but for right now, he's number 5. And for number 4 on my list of biggest draft day steals, I'm going with the highest selected player on the list. And while it's hard to say that somebody who was picked in the top 10 is a steal, when you consider the circumstances and the way this player has changed the game, after being selected number 7 overall in 2009 by the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry deserves this spot on the list. In fact, the only reason why he's not higher on the list, or even number 1, is because he was drafted relatively high when you compare him to the top 3 players on the list. Now, coming into this draft, I did say that Curry was the second best player in the draft behind Blake Griffin. After seeing what he did at Davidson, I knew he was going to come in to be an elite scorer in this league someday. But I don't think that anybody at the time saw how great Chef Curry would be, or how he would revolutionize the game. Over the course of his 14 seasons, Curry has averaged just under 25 points, 6.5 assists, 5 rebounds, and 1.6 steals per game. Currently holds numerous NBA records in the regular season, playoffs, and NBA Finals, and he's the career leader in three-point shots made by a wide margin that just keeps growing. Curry has been the centerpiece for one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history, helping Golden State win 4 titles and winning the Finals MVP in his most recent title run. He's been selected to 9 All-Star games, 9 All-NBA teams including 4 first-team selections. He's cooked up 2 scoring titles and 2 MVP awards as well. And while Steph's not known for his defense, it is an underrated part of his game as he led the entire league in steals in 2016. And besides the incredible career Steph ended up having, a big reason why he's on this list as such a steal is because of some of the players taken ahead of him. Of course, Blake went number 1 and James Harden went at 3. Yeah, but you also had Hasheem Thabeet at number 2 and Tyreke Evans at 4. And in the 2 spots directly ahead of Curry, 2 other point guards, Ricky Rubio and Johnny Flynn, went 5 and 6 respectively. Considering all these chances to draft one of the greatest players in NBA history, but taking players at the same position who have never even made an All-Star team or an All-NBA team, Curry was an easy choice for the number 4 spot here. And for number 3, we're going to go with another NBA legend selected in the lottery, but this pick, in a way, will go on to change NBA history. With the 13th pick in the 1996 draft, the Charlotte Hornets selected a high school player out of Lower Merion who they traded to the Lakers for the rights to Vlade Divac. Unfortunately, that 18-year-old phenom would become an NBA icon and one of the greatest players of his era, and the trade allowing a young Kobe Bryant to team up with Shaq, who was the most dominant player in the world at the time, would help Los Angeles dominate the league for the next decade. Now, Kobe was young, but even at 18, he had a polished game. The reason he fell to the bottom of the lottery was because nobody was really sure what type of player he was. One scout was quoted as saying, he had questionable ball handling skills, that he may not be ready for the rigors of NBA life and does not have the body for it right now, and that he does not have a true position, played all 5 in high school and didn't perfect any of the 5. And Kobe always played with a chip on his shoulder. On his way to becoming one of the deadliest players to ever play the game, the Mamba averaged 25 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game over the course of his 20-year career. At his peak, he was over 35 points per game in 2006. Kobe helped the Lakers win 5 NBA titles, including 3 alongside Shaq, who won Finals MVP all 3 seasons. In 2009, Kobe took home his first of 2 Finals MVPs for his 2 rings without the Big Diesel. Besides championships, Kobe was an 18-time All-Star, winning the All-Star MVP award a record 4 times. He was selected for 15 All-NBA teams, with 11 being first-team picks, to go along with 12 All-Defensive teams, with 9 being first-team selections. He also won 2 scoring titles, but only 1 MVP award. And Kobe also owns so many NBA records that I could probably do an entire video on just that alone, but for the sake of time, I'm going to list some of them here for you. Now, with everything Kobe accomplished during his career, it's hard to argue that he should be in the number 3 spot here. But for number 2, I went with perhaps one of the most polarizing players in the league, and on this list. For the second biggest draft day steal in NBA history, I'm going to the 5th pick in the second round of the 2012 draft, when the Golden State Warriors, who are on this list for the second time in the last 3 spots, selected Draymond Green out of Michigan State. Now, most people will agree that Draymond Green has been one of the best defensive players of his era, but I think his impact on this Dub squad has been severely understated. He can guard any position 1 through 5, his basketball IQ is unmatched, and much like I mentioned with Dennis Rodman earlier, Draymond can dominate the game without ever scoring a point. But besides his defense and rebounding, Green is a willing and capable passer. His complementary style made him the perfect setup man for guys like Curry and Klay to get open looks, and he's always been a legitimate triple-double threat on any given night. And while his numbers don't tell the story, he has averaged just under 9 points, 7 rebounds, and 5.5 assists to go along with 1 block and 1.5 steals per game in his 11 seasons. But I always argue that there were 3 things that turned the Golden State Warriors from a really good team to an unbeatable dynasty. The first was Steph Curry's emergence. The second was Steve Kerr's screen and move system that focused on quick passes and moving without the ball. But the third, and possibly most important, was Kerr finally putting Draymond Green into the starting lineup to replace David Lee. In his 3rd season, Kerr was giving Green the chance to be the point forward and facilitator in this new offense. And the impact Draymond had on the defensive end immediately turned Golden State into a championship contender. Draymond's intensity helped the Warriors win 4 NBA titles. He's made 4 All-Star appearances and has 2 All-NBA team selections, 1 second and 1 third team. He also has 8 All-Defensive selections, including 4 first-team selections to go along with the Defensive Player of the Year award he won in 2017. With what he's been able to accomplish in this league, after being selected in the 2nd round, the most underrated player on this list is a perfect fit for that Dubs team and for my number 2 pick. And at this point, I think my number 1 pick is pretty obvious. Coming off his first ring and first Finals MVP, Nikola Jokic, who was taken out of Serbia by the Denver Nuggets with the number 11 pick in the 2nd round of the 2014 draft, gets the top spot on my list. I mentioned the scouting report on Jokic earlier, and I'll bet that even when they were drafting him, the Nuggets had no idea that they'd just chosen the man who would help deliver the first NBA championship in the history of the franchise. Now, I'm not just being a prisoner of the moment here and putting him at number 1 because he's the new big thing or because he just won the title. The Joker earned this spot. Despite having 0 hype and getting off to a relatively slow start, Jokic turned himself into one of the best bigs to ever play, and it's hard to argue that anyone has been better than him over the last 5 seasons. Despite smaller numbers from playing fewer minutes earlier in his career, over the course of 8 seasons in the NBA, Jokic has averaged 20 points, 10.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, over 1 steal, and a half a block a game. And while he gets a lot of flack for his defense, he's an underrated defender. As a big, he averages over 1 steal a game for his career, and if you watched him in these playoffs, you saw that while he's not the greatest one-on-one defender, he is a solid and willing team defender, and he does make plays on that side of the ball. Jokic's basketball IQ is off the charts. He's one of the best, if not the best, passing big man to ever play the game. This helped him set a single record for highest single-season player efficiency rating in NBA history in 2022, breaking the previous record held by Michael Jordan. In just the last 5 seasons alone, Jokic has 5 All-Star appearances, 5 All-NBA selections including 3 first and 2 second-team picks, and back-to-back MVPs. And he still has a long way to go to add to his already impressive Hall of Fame resume, as Jokic is only 27 years old. And here's a list of NBA records he already has. And while he may not have as many rings or as much pomp and circumstance as some of the players below him on this list, the fact that he's still so young and only played 8 seasons, but already has more MVPs than Kobe, and as many MVPs and Finals MVPs as Steph, and considering he was taken in the middle of the second round, the Joker is without a doubt the greatest draft day steal in NBA history. Now, this is the internet, so I know not everybody's going to agree with the list, and I know you're going to want to tell me about that. So jump into the comments and let me know if you think I got anything wrong, and let me know if you have a better list. But certainly, thank you all for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to follow and smash that like button. I'm going to be doing a series soon telling you why your favorite NBA player isn't the GOAT. And if you want more of me off of YouTube, you can always follow on Twitch and TikTok at SmashAdams28. But until next time, get smashed, everyone.